Hi, my name is Angel. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to the first wrap-up of 2025, which obviously is my January wrap-up. I read 18 books in the month of January and this is where I talk to you guys about them. So first of all, for a few stats, I read 4,985 pages and listened to 17 hours and 57 minutes of audiobook. So in my spreadsheet, last year I just put all the pages in for all of the books, and so it was kind of a little odd at the end of the year. So this year in my spreadsheet, if I listen to a book fully on audio, I'm not inputting the number of pages, so that way it's slightly more accurate to how much I actually read versus how much just in general there was. I don't know if that makes any sense, but my average rating for the month was a 3.8, which I feel like is a really good rating. I think like 90% of the books that I read in January were 4 stars, so I feel like that checks out. I also just want to quickly say that I am trying out a new microphone on this camera, so this is going to be kind of a little bit of a test of that. So if it sounds different to you guys, that is why. Let me know if it sounds good. Let me know if it sounds bad. If you don't notice that at all, I'm just very curious on your guys' opinion of it. So to start us off, I am going to talk about the books that I already read on my channel. I did 2 vlogs in January, so I just want to quickly go through those books and not be constantly talking about them over and over and over again. So if you want to see my full thoughts, then I will link those vlogs down below. But the first one I did was reading BookTube's favorite horror books of last year. I read 3 books in that. The first one is Bury Your Gays by Chuck Tingle. This is about a man who is forced with either killing off his gay characters or making them straight. And when he refuses to do that, he is then hunted and tormented by his very own horror characters. This had a lot of great messaging and social commentary. The horror was great as well, and it got a 4-star from me. Also in that video, I read Rest Stop by Nat Cassidy, which is a novella about a man who gets locked in a bathroom at a gas station during the night, and there is a strange killer lurking, and he starts to mess with this guy, and it's very psychological and also very bloody. I gave this one a 4-star as well. And the last one for that video was Bloom by Delilah S. Dawson. This is about a woman who falls into a infatuation romantic relationship with another woman, but that woman has a lot of dark secrets that are hiding. So it's just about this relationship with a lot of red flags and what we come to learn about these people. It takes a very dark turn. It is sapphic. It is very like cottagecore vibes, and I really loved it. I gave this one 5 stars, and I still find myself thinking about it even now, weeks later. The second vlog that I did for January was reading Bookstagram's favorite horror books of last year. So once again, I read 3 books in there, starting with American Rapture by CJ Lead. This is about a girl who grew up in a very sheltered home with very religious parents, and it talks about the harm of religion and religious trauma, but there's also a very strange viral apocalypse happening, and she must navigate this world in order to get to her twin brother. I really enjoyed this one for the most part. I really liked the messaging and commentary in this one, and I gave it 4 stars. Then I read All the Fiends of Hell by Adam Neville. This is an alien invasion apocalypse story. We are following a man who finds these 2 children, and he kind of has a responsibility to these children throughout the story, and there were things that I liked about it. I liked the existential dread that it induces in the reader, but the story itself and the characters themselves, it didn't feel very strong to me. I just didn't feel fully connected, and so I gave this one 3 stars. And lastly, in that video, I read Diavola, however we decided it's pronounced, because I was trying to figure this out in the vlog, and somebody commented that the author pronounces it differently than how I was pronouncing it, because I was pronouncing it how the audiobook narrator was pronouncing it. One of these days I'll figure it out. This is by Jennifer Thorne, and this is about a woman on vacation with her family in Italy, and the villa that they're staying at is like notoriously haunted, and this entity latches onto her as the black sheep of the family. I really love the writing. I really love the setting in this. The horror was great as well, although I didn't feel a lot of suspense or a lot of like danger for the character, so I didn't feel fully like scared or super invested. So this one I gave 3.5 stars. Moving on to everything else that I read in January that I did not talk about on my channel, starting with my 3-star, which is Two Can Play by Ali Hazelwood. This is a audiobook exclusive and I listened to it on Spotify. This is pretty short. It's about two people that work for rival video game development companies, and their two teams have to work together to create this one video game that they both want to work on for separate reasons. This is very classic Ali Hazelwood fashion, where there's a miscommunication, a misunderstanding, and the woman thinks that this man hates her, and she's like, oh, he's so horrible, I'm just gonna avoid him because he like hates me, and I'm just like a little girl and he's a big man. And then we come to learn that that's not true, and actually he's like in love with her, and then they get together by the end. It didn't do anything unexpected, but I really wasn't expecting a lot anyways going into it. I just like to read Ali Hazelwood's romances because I feel like they are very quick and very easy, and I usually know like I'll come out with at least some sort of enjoyment. I haven't hated an Ali Hazelwood book yet. I guess Bride would probably be the closest. I was not the target audience for that book, but the rest of her stuff I've generally enjoyed. I will say there is a certain word that is used in Ali Hazelwood's books during the smutty scenes that I'm not going to say right now, but if you look at my Goodreads review, it tells you which word that is. And I already hate reading this book. I hate experiencing it with my eyes. To have to listen to it multiple times via an audiobook was very uncomfortable for me. Now we are moving into my 4 stars, which is the biggest category for January, which is good because it means that most of what I was reading I was enjoying. First, we have Our Winter Monster by Dennis Mahoney. This was an arc that I had, and I believe it published at the end of January. This is like a winter creature feature. Let me think for a second what the plot is. This is about a couple who has been struggling in their relationship after a tragic event happened to them in the past, and they decided to go on vacation and have some couple time, have some time alone together to work through a lot of their issues, and then they end up fighting for survival because they end up in this very small town that is being plagued by this wintry monster. And I think it was really interesting. It did a lot of unique things within the story and within the creature itself, and I like the way that it explored the relationship between these two people, and then also all of the side characters were really interesting. Like, we're following a sheriff, we're following a bad guy, and I think the way that it all came together was really, really interesting. I would recommend this if you like those like complicated relationship dynamics and these people struggling to stay alive, and then having to figure out on top of that, okay, once we get out of this situation, are we still compatible? Are we still going to be together? And having to work through just a lot of different things in a very dire situation. Then I read Beautyland by Marie-Helene Bertino, I think is how you say it. This one I listened to on audio as well, and I really enjoyed it. This is about a young girl who is an alien. Like, she is not from Earth, and she has been told from her superiors, the aliens off Earth somewhere, that her goal is to fit in with the humans and have the human experience and report back to them on her findings, because basically like the alien planet is dying and they need somewhere else to live where they can blend in with the natural species that is already there. So they want to know, is it going to be too difficult to blend in and be a human, and what is being human really about? So this woman, all throughout her childhood all the way to adulthood, we are following her, and she communicates with these aliens through a fax machine. So she'll type something out, fax it to them, and they'll fax back with a response. It's definitely a very sci-fi premise, but don't expect like a heavy sci-fi book. It's not about the aliens, and it's not about space and them finding a new planet. It's really about this woman that we're following, and it's a very literary story following her through her life and making all these discoveries. I think things that we all experience in life and things that we all have to figure out for ourselves at one point or another. And she gets pushed by a friend at one point to publish all of her faxes with the aliens, and that becomes a big thing because obviously there's people that believe her and they're like, oh my god, I'm an alien too, and then there's people that are like, this bitch is crazy. Some people think she made it up just for the gimmick of the story, and so it becomes a very interesting time just following her through all of these moments in her life. It dips a little bit into grief and loss towards the end and has a lot of really profound statements. I think maybe I would have had stronger feelings towards this one if I physically read it and was annotating it, because listening to audiobook, I'm like, wow, like that was a good quote, but I'd have no way to keep it in my head so that I could flip back to it. But I did really enjoy it, and I definitely would recommend this one. My next 4-star was The Poorly Made and Other Things by Sam Rebelin. I'm not sure how you say it. This is the author of Edenville, which I haven't read because I've seen a lot of not good reviews for it, but I really enjoyed this collection, so I think I might have to read Edenville now. This is another arc I had that publishes in February, I believe. This is a short story collection that takes place in the world that Edenville takes place in, but is not connected to that story at all, so you can read it without having read that. And we are following different people within this one county that have all experienced something strange and have very weird things happening. There's supernatural things, there is a touch of cosmic horror in here. It's really focusing on like a local legend and local lore about something. We get chapters in between from a woman emailing her brother, and she's explaining this story of something that happened, and then we get the actual story chapters, which are focusing on different people around the area that are experiencing something strange because of this baseline story of what happened. I feel like that doesn't make any sense, but I'm like, I'm not gonna sit here and explain everything that happened in the book and then give away the spoilers, because what's the point of that? I found the stories to be very captivating, very weird, and very unsettling. I think if you like weird horror, if you like strange, unexplained things, I would recommend this. I really enjoyed the way that it was written too. Like, it really enhanced the stories. I think they were all very easy to read and they were all written in their own different style, but a lot of times it was kind of like direct to reader almost, where you're listening to somebody tell a story, and so it feels so much more authentic and really pulls you deeper into the world of this strangeness. Then I read The Garden by Claire Beams. I read this one during Winterween, and this is about a woman, one particular woman that we're following, who has struggled to get pregnant. She's had a lot of miscarriages, so she goes to this home, this medical facility for pregnant women, and they are given a special treatment there, and they stay there until they deliver their baby, and then everything's good and they get to go home. But there are a lot of weird things happening, and the woman that we're following, she does develop a couple of friendships while she's there, and her and 2 other girls become kind of obsessed with the gardens on the property, and there is kind of a magical quality to that they discover, and kind of intertwines with their story of trying to become a mother and with their pregnancy and with childbirth. And I thought it was really interesting. It's also about, I have to go and look at what the name of it is, but this is about a drug. I'm not gonna know how to pronounce this. Diethylstilbestrol. Don't know how to say that. Synthetic estrogen pioneered for treating repeated miscarriage by the husband and wife researcher physician team of Dr. Olive Watkins Smith and Dr. George Van Sislen Smith, and prescribed in this country from the 1940s through the 1970s, which has since been found to cause severe health complications and birth defects. So I thought that was really interesting because that wasn't something that I'd heard of before, and then I got to kind of do some research on it afterwards, and that's where the inspiration for the story comes from. And you know, the doctors that we have at this facility, they are a couple and they are very strange in themselves. It just all kind of gives you this weird vibe. But let me say that if you want a lot of horror in your horror, and if you want these explanations that are going to make sense, and if you want action and things happening and things that are cohesive, I don't think you'll like this book, because it's not very upfront horror. It's all very quiet and very subtle throughout the whole time, and you could definitely make the argument with this one that nothing happens, and I would say that's true. But I loved the writing in this, and I loved the weird kind of unsettling quality to it, where you know that there's something off but you don't know what it is. And I liked the way that the ending wrapped up the story, and then we get this connection. Maybe if you're somebody that has prior knowledge of this drug, you would be able to kind of figure that out sooner, but because I had never heard of it, it wasn't until the very end where the author stated about this drug that I was like, okay, I think that's kind of cool. So this one worked for me. I don't think it will work for everybody. Also for Winterween, I read The Honeys by Ryan LaSala. This is a YA queer horror novel. We are following a main character who is non-binary, well, not non-binary, gender fluid. So they kind of go back and forth. Sometimes they're feeling more feminine, sometimes more masculine. Their name is Mars, and their twin sister has just died in a very horrific way that they have witnessed. And in order to kind of get answers and seek this connection that they were missing with their sister, they decided to go back to this Aspen summer camp, Aspen Conservancy Summer Academy, where Mars's sister spent a lot of her time, and he is hoping that he can find somebody who is friends with her and just generally figure out like what was going on in her head and what was going on in her life leading up to these strange circumstances of her death. This one is definitely for the weird horror lovers, those that love queer horror as well. I think the representation was done really well, and I really love where the story went. It kind of goes off the rails towards the end, and you're like, what in the world is happening right now? Like, this is crazy. And it was great. This one I did a mix. I listened to it partially on audio, and I also physically read it, which were both a great experience. I would recommend listening to this one on audio though, if that is a way that you like to consume your books, because I think it was done really well. The narration, there was also some little added side effects, and it was just very well produced and really enhanced the story. Then I read Last Days by Adam Neville, which is a little chunky of a book. This is about a cult, the Temple of the Last Days, that was active in the 70s, and then it led up to this very big crime scene with a lot of dead bodies, and now we are following this guerrilla documentary filmmaker who has just been asked to do this job of going to all of these places and piecing together the timeline of this cult and leading up to where they all ended. So we are following these people as they go to different locations to film this and to interview past members of the cult. They are hired by somebody who also had a part in this back in the 70s, and there are a lot of secrets to be uncovered, and it takes a very paranormal turn. Obviously, we're reading a lot about brutal violence and abuse and death, and it is hard to read at times. There are different scenes that do involve children with this cult, so just be aware of that before going into it. But obviously, like, the story focuses on the paranormal aspects. Like, yes, all of this other horrific things were going on, but we are focusing on these entities that were also involved. This one has a lot of really creepy imagery and a lot of very creepy scenes. There was a lot in this book that I didn't enjoy. There were some parts though that did start to drag because it is such a long book, but overall I really liked it. It got very creepy and very unsettling, and I think the inclusion of history and explaining why all of this is happening and how it came to be was super fascinating. My final 4-star is The Bog Wife by Kay Chronister, which I think was my most anticipated release of 2024, and I just now got to it. This is a gothic Appalachian horror where we are following a family who has always lived on this property that contains a bog. For decades, they have had this agreement with the land where when their patriarch dies, they feed him to the bog, and then the bog creates a woman to be the wife to the eldest son in the family. And the whole idea is that if they take care of the bog, if they take care of the land, then the bog takes care of them. But this family, this generation that we are following, they have a lot of different issues there. One of the daughters actually left the property and went out into the world to start her own life away from this because she just didn't want this for herself. She was the only person to cross the property line and leave the property and do something else. But when their father is dying, she needs to come back so they can all be there when they give his body to the bog. However, things quickly take a turn because the bog does not produce a wife for the eldest son. Their fortune is dwindling. The house is just absolutely falling apart. The bog, the land is suffering, and it's just a very difficult time for all of these siblings, and it's a very dysfunctional family. Like, they all have different opinions and feel a different sense of responsibility for different things, and we are just following them navigating this time in their life. It's obviously very, very difficult. They are struggling a lot, and then they start to uncover some truths that were hidden from them, that they were led to believe things that are not true, and then they have to figure out what they really want to do. I really, really loved the writing in this, and I really loved the setting. The ties to nature, I think, were just beautiful. I think it was paced really well, and overall it was just an enjoyable read. Then I had one 4.5 star, which is another arc. This comes out in February, I believe, and I highly, highly recommend picking this book up when it does release. This is Victorian Psycho by Virginia Fito. This takes place in the Victorian era, and we are following this woman who goes to be they have like a certain name. Governess, that's the name. So she is going to this prestigious estate to be the new governess to the children, but she is fucked up and she's like, I'm gonna murder all of these people. And it's interesting because she's our main character and she talks directly to us at the beginning of the book. She says, everybody in this house will be dead in 3 months. And then we just follow her as she wreaks havoc and kills all of these people. The atmosphere in this one is so captivating. It pulls you right into the story. I think the writing is stunning and really, really helps to draw you in deeper. This has a very interesting blend of really messed up violence and really dark violence. Like, there are children being killed in here. A lot of children being killed in here, so if you're sensitive to that, don't pick it up. You know, reader beware. Like, this, I'm going to talk about it and I'm going to make it sound so great, and it is, but I also need you all to know that it's very, very graphic and very, very dark. So if that's not something you're comfortable with, don't read this one. If you do like that, then read this one because it's fantastic. There is this blend, this inclusion of humor and satire and commentary on women and a woman's role in the world, and I just think it was so well done. So this is definitely for the people who love feminine rage, the people who support women's wrongs, the unhinged women lovers. This is if you loved The Eyes Are the Best Part or Mayfly for the graphic violence in there. If you liked A Certain Hunger for the violence in there, but also the way that that one is written and the way that it is very descriptive and the main character talks to you a lot of the time, then this one is just a great read. I can see this becoming the book that people are talking about when it comes out, so definitely don't miss out. Pick it up. There's also, I think it's currently being adapted for film, which is fantastic. Now to get on to my 5 stars for the month. I really like the color scheme we have going. Like, they are pretty much exactly the same color. Anyway, What My Bones Know by Stephanie Fu is a memoir of her dealing with complex PTSD, discovering that she has it and discovering what it is and how to learn to live with it. This is a topic, like trauma and childhood trauma, that I read a lot on my own, or have read a lot about on my own, and I haven't really talked a lot about those books on BookTube, but I feel like I kind of want to. But I've read a lot of nonfiction about this topic for different reasons, and all of those have been very informative and talking about how to and the science behind how these things begin and where trauma comes from and how to deal with it and all of this. And I think all of those are great, but this one was really interesting to read from just a personal account of somebody learning this about themselves and then having to do the work to heal from it and spread this message that you can heal from this. And then also her journey of like trying to find resources or other people that have dealt with this, because complex PTSD or complex trauma is something that I feel like is more newly being talked about. There is still a lot of people that group PTSD all into one category when really it's not that way. Like, there are a lot of different things that contribute to the type of trauma that a person has and the way that that type of trauma affects them. So she really struggled when she got her diagnosis with finding any information about this online or finding other people with this condition. And so it was really interesting to see her have to kind of figure everything out for herself and try all these different methods. And she does talk about, you know, how she is privileged to be in a place where she can take off months of work and just dedicate herself to healing herself. And I do appreciate that she touches on the fact that not everybody can do that, but she just kind of wants to act as a guide or somebody to look up to and say, she did it, she did the work, and she can heal herself and continue to heal. Obviously, this is kind of a lifelong journey, but I just really liked it. There are a lot of tabs in here, things that I thought were interesting, things that I thought were inspiring, things that I thought were relatable at certain points, and I just really appreciated this book. On a totally different note, my last 5-star is The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead, which is a thriller about a woman who finds out that one of her college friends has passed away, and she returns to the area to dig a little deeper and uncover the truth of what has happened. And we are following her through this investigation, but we are also flashing back to her days in college with this woman and another woman, and they got involved in a very dark sex cult. And it's really interesting watching how that all plays out and how it has affected them into adulthood, and then where we are now with this woman that has turned up dead. I think Ashley Winstead just does a great job of pulling a reader into a story. Like, this is the second book that I've read from her, and I knew pretty quickly that it was probably going to be a 5-star because I was just so drawn into the story, into the world of the characters themselves. I was so connected to, and I really love Ashley Winstead's writing. It just, I can't even explain why, but there is something about it that I'm like, I feel physical pain having to put this book down and walk away from it. Like, I was reading it and it was like getting close to 11 o'clock at night probably, and I usually try to go to bed between 10 or 10:30 if I work the next day, and I was like, I can't put it down. Like, I need to keep reading. So that is pretty much everything that I'm going to talk about. I did read one more book in January. This was called The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. I have decided that I'm going to do a dedicated rant video for this book. I have never done that before, but it's something that I wanted to start doing more this year, and so the universe presented me with the perfect book for it because this was awful. So a little spoiler for that video, I'm giving it 1 star. I had a lot of issues with the actual content of the book, and with the creator of this book, and I am excited to talk about all those things. And with all of that being said, that was all 18 books that I read in January. Let me know if you guys have read any of these, and thank you so much for watching. Hopefully I will see you next time.